here and all that.
I'm hitting record just now, just so
We don't miss
forget.
it. Yeah.
'Cause we forgot the last board meeting to record.
Okay, Julianne will be there 1 second. And is it Dr. How do you pronounce it? Sweet?
Sweet.
Sweet, is he coming on as well? Should be, right?
He should be.
So do we introduce him as Dr. Sui and ComQC from there on out, or are you gonna? I figured I actually, like, when I looked at what you said, I was like, oh, if I have to do it, I'm just gonna let them introduce themselves and then I can find out exactly how you say it.
So I should be good. I don't have to leave here until right around 1. So I should be able to do the intro, Laura, and then you can take over.
Yeah, great.
Okay.
Hey, Julianne.
How's it going?
Good. Okay, we can hear you. Sounds good.
Kai, I have a question.
Yeah.
Here. Is it just Gilbane, or do you Gilbane Builders or Gilbane Incorporated?
Gilbane Building Company.
Okay, since we are all here, Jen, is it okay if I run through the order real quick? Okay,
Absolutely.
great, wonderful. So we are going to start off 12 o'clock. We have 5 minutes. So we are going to start off and record will be hit. So this is going to be a recorded webinar. Jen is going to give an overview of why WIC Baltimore is hosting this panel, what we expect for the desired outcomes to be, and we'll give an expectation and timeline of the participants. So she'll take a few minutes for that, and then she'll go ahead and introduce Paul and QC. QC is still not on here yet. Paul and QC will then introduce themselves and present their overall findings. We expect this to be about 20 minutes or so. And at that time, Laura or Jen, who is going to moderate any questions coming in?
Emma's actually going to be in charge of
Emma.
the
Okay,
questions.
Great. Okay,
It's
so
going to
Emma
be our
will moderate.
behind the scenes person.
So in terms of Jen, this is, you want me to, hold on. For questions, do you want me to ask them out loud?
Yeah, so
I
what
think
I'm
you
telling people is that we're going to handle questions at the end.
Okay.
And that you'll just keep track of chat. You could read them out loud, or at the end, we can allow people to come off mic.
Perfect. We do have 2 slots on the slides for questions. So we have the one right after QC and Paul, and then we have the one at the end after the panelists. So that's good. That's perfect.
Perfect.
But are you saying that you do want the questions to be asked live right after Paul's findings?
I honestly think that we should wait until the very end because I'm worried about timing.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
So findings first, and then once they're finished, then Laura is going to jump in, introduce the panel and moderator, which is me. And once Laura introduces me, I'm going to give everybody a minute to introduce themselves in the order that's listed, which is Andrea, Kai, Megan, Brianna, Beth, and Julianne. And then from there, I'm going to go into the questions. We're going to start with question number 3 because that's the first lead off to the question. It'll be directed to Andrea, then Beth, then Brianna, then question number 2 to Julianne, and then Megan. Question 4 and 5 are pretty similar, so they're going to be Kai and then Brianna. Question 6, Beth, and then Julianne. Question 7, Megan, and then Kai. And hopefully there's time for question 8 to Andrea, back to Andrea again. I had asked this yesterday. I'm assuming nobody has any issues with the question they're directed to answer, or if they have a burning desire to answer any one of the questions that were listed. We're all good with that? Okay, thank you all so much. Thank you. And thank you to Jen for putting together the questions. But and then from there,
Libby,
yeah.
Libby, if I can just, sorry. So I just want to make sure I'm at 20 minutes for the presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. You are at 20 minutes, and we're going to save all of the questions from the audience until the very end. Now, the very first question is what stood out about your findings. So between Andrea, Beth, and Brianna, we might help to answer some of the questions the panelists actually have, but it's going to be at the very end that we'll bring on Emma. Then you can start to say what the audience questions are at the very end. And sounds good.
Awesome.
Will the audience be able to see the chat?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. This is just a regular Zoom meeting. We didn't set up as a webinar or anything like that.
Okay. Thank you.
No
Hey,
problem.
How many do you, good.
So just a quick question, when we have multiple panelists answering a question, are you going to transition from one panelist to the next, or are we to the kind of pass the football?
Why don't you guys go ahead and pass the football? That's way it's a little bit more seamless. So I did
Okay.
try to put the order. So please, Andrea, you're going to pass it to Beth, who's going to pass it to Brianna. Then I'll jump in and ask the second question.
And based on the timeline, you have 4.8 minutes for each of these questions. I think it's a pretty good amount of time, and I'll keep track of that, to make sure that we're not going over and we have plenty of time to get to questions that other people may have.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
This is perfect. Go team.
Yes.
Okay.
Question, are we able to, so in the first question, it's like, what did you think about these findings? I'm like, whew, I don't actually know yet. So I feel like I might have some more questions for Paul. So is it okay if like I have a question for Paul to
Absolutely.
like use the opportunity for me to ask the question
100%.
instead of like me just giving my opinion? Does that work?
100%. Yes,
Okay,
yes,
cool.
absolutely. It's
Yeah,
collaborative.
I had a question also after reading the executive summaries myself. I was like, okay. Yeah.
Do you want to ask it during this first question, or do you want to ask it at the very end? And it's 12 o'clock.
Well, we said we weren't going to roll till 12, start letting people in till 12:05.
Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, great. Nope, that this is collaborative. I feel like you guys can, make it your own, and it doesn't have to be by the script, and, however you feel is good. And if somebody really burningly wants to jump in on a point that was making, please, as long as you don't feel like you're interrupting the flow, I think it should be fine.
I
We
welcome
should-
questions anytime, so it won't bother me at all.
We should let people in, but we can start at 12:05. I don't want to lose people
Yeah.
that are in the lobby.
Sounds good. I'm going to share the screen. Is that good? Great,
Yep.
cool. And then I will let folks in.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We are going to give it a couple of minutes and get started just right around 12:05. For all you joining, I just wanted to give you a little heads up that we will be starting at 12:05, so in about 1 minute. Happy WIC week, everyone.
Good afternoon.
All right. Good afternoon and happy 25th annual WIC Week. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We ask that you all stay on mute if you're not a panelist or a presenter. And if you have a question, please use the hand raise function or type it in the chat later when we open it up for questions. With that, I wanted to apologize if there is any background noise. I am in Annapolis today, trying to get additional funding for the Maryland Center for Construction Education and Innovation. So really exciting day here in Maryland for construction. With that said, Emma Shirey of MCCI will be monitoring the chat and making sure that our presenters and panelists see your questions. In the interest of time, again, like I said, we will be answering them at the end of the presentation. I'm going to go over our agenda for a minute. I'm Jennifer Sproul, president of the Maryland Center for Construction Education and Innovation. I'm a NAWIC Baltimore chapter member, former Northeast director of NAWIC, and I just celebrated my 13th year in NAWIC last week. I realized the other day that I've actually been in construction industry for almost as long as we've been celebrating WIC Week. So it is not uncommon to see women on job sites. It's not as uncommon to see women on job sites today as it was when I entered the industry 23 years ago. But I'm sure everyone on this call knows that there is still work to be done. So I met Paul and QC, our experts, this past fall when MCCI was hosting our symposium at UMD. When I first read their research, it was a profound moment for me. For once, there was quantifiable data that backs up what we as women have known all along. That's the trick to gender disparities in the construction industry. Individually, it is often hard to prove that the hurdles we face in our career paths are due to gender. But when the data is in black and white, as you'll see in Paul and QC's research, it becomes undeniable. So why are we starting off with this research? We think it's important for women to recognize that there are not just colloquial stories and one-off instances of women being treated differently than their male counterparts. It is a fact that we have to work harder, get more advanced degrees and certifications, and job hop more to get ahead. That's why every woman you know who has advanced in construction is a superstar. But just leaving it at a study isn't enough. This industry is chock full of opportunities for women to have amazing family-sustaining careers. So we're going to hear from our panelists, women in the industry who work for companies who are actively trying to make our industry a place that women can thrive. And with that, I will introduce our researchers. We have Drs. Hickey and Chu, who will share their findings with us.
Figuring out how to use the mute button. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate the opportunity to share our research, and hopefully it's up on the screen and you can see it. The first question I get is, you're a guy, what do you care about gender diversity? So it's very personal to me. I watched my wife fight through the industry for 20 plus years. And as she trained the young male engineers who then became managers, she was left to train the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. So she's my inspiration behind this. So there's a personal goal here. And as Jen alluded to, now it's taking the research and applying it. So this is the continuation of our effort to really connect with industry and make a real change. So for us, this is really exciting to get to this phase. And it's funny, she said, doctor, I literally just finished. I walk in May, but just finished a couple weeks ago. So pretty excited about that. All right. Now, the difficult part of this, I'm a little long-winded, and taking 3 years of research and jamming it into 20 minutes is a little tough. So thank you in advance for your understanding. So rewind back to 2018, 2019, when we started this, we found that, well, one, we were aware that there was an issue anecdotally, but putting numbers to it, putting scientific research to it, and now we prove, yes, in fact, there is a gender disparity. You know, it started off like, oh, it's an old boys network, or it's all guys. And now we have the numbers to back that up. And what we found, or what we didn't find, was many studies talking about that specific to AEC and specific to leadership as well. And this is a focus on leadership. And fast forward, we intend to go deeper into the organization and look at other levels to make sure that there is that career path to create change. And oh, by the way, practically from an industry perspective, 650,000 worker shortage. So if you're effectively ignoring 50% of your population, and this is US based, by the way, you're really not achieving your staffing goals. So benefits of diversity, and again, this is a scientific approach. So these are not findings from us. These are previous findings, but you get better project delivery. Clients are more excited, more satisfaction. They're more engaged. You get fresh perspective. You avoid that groupthink. Homophilia, basically that hiring and someone that looks like me basically perpetuates the homogeneous nature of the organization and the industry. So trying to bring in those different viewpoints will only improve your bottom line as a company. So there's the incentive for companies. But let's go ahead and get straight into the data. And one thing I have to apologize for, this slide deck, I will correct it and put it back up, but this is about 4 different presentations that are brought together. So the colors and each slide has it on the bottom, but sometimes the blue jumps from women to men. So apologies, we'll get that fixed and get a clean deck up. But each slide does identify it. So first stage, we looked at representation. And all of our studies, all 3 stages or phases of our study, use the ENR top 400 as the sample. So we wanted to look at the biggest companies in the industry. We wanted to be relatively consistent, again, a scientific approach. So as we go through this, that is your basic sample. Now, note that each year, some companies fall off, new companies enter, but in general, the set of 400 is reasonably consistent. But if you go back to our 2019 study that was published in 2020, over 3/4 of companies in the top 400 had 0 women engineering executives. None. Not even your token. So they're right there, basically shows you a significant issue in gender diversity. And overall, when we looked at the C-suite positions, women filled 10.5%. But if you subdivided that out between engineering and non-engineering, defined as finance, human resources, marketing, legal, that percentage dropped to 3.9%. So basically it ended up being about 25.2% non-engineering and 3.9% engineering. All right. Again, I'll try to accelerate because I tend to talk a little too much. Looking at size of the company, again, we're looking at top 400. So we're excluding the vast majority of the industry, all of those companies that are 401 down to, solopreneurs and entrepreneurs. We found that larger firms, and this breaks it out basically over $1 billion down to under 250 million. Larger firms have better diversity. Not to say that it's good by any stretch, but it's better, which actually suggests by the trend, and if you look at the orange line, you're going from 2.4% women engineering, again, engineering, up to 4.5%. So it almost doubles. as you get to larger firms, but it also suggests that all the firms under 250 are probably a lot lower. I say probably, that's not something we studied. It is something we want to expand it to. So in the summary for the first phase, again, this is 3 years of research compacted down. If you look at the population in the United States, it's 50.8% women. But if you look at the civil engineering graduates over the last 24 years, why 24 years? We found a separate Harvard study that looked at the average time to reach the C-suite, not just AEC, all industries in the United States, and it was an average of 24 years. So we said, okay, are there enough women with applicable degrees? And no, you do not need a civil engineering degree to reach a C-suite. You can have another degree, you can move certainly between areas, you can go from engineering to finance or vice versa, but wanted to look, were there enough women with a very applicable degree for a long enough time to have that pipeline? And that was 21.5%. That actually rose to 21.9 in the second phase. Then if you look at the industry overall, engineering, non-engineering, executive, all the way to intern, it was 9.9%. That rose to 10.9 in the second phase. But then if you get to engineering leadership, again, that's C-suite, it was only 3.9%. So how do you go from 1 in 2 to 1 in 5 to 1 in 10 to less than 1 in 25? All right. Oh, and one other thing, some of the industry segments, and they're not necessarily included in here, did show better diversity. Green, the top 100 green companies was almost double. And the question we have untested hypothesis that the green industry, is it because women are more geared towards contributing and nurturing? Again, this is scientific prior research, not things that we came up with, and they're attracted to the industry, or is it that the green industry is relatively new, those segments, those companies, and that there's less entrenched hierarchy. They don't have to overcome 100 years of hierarchy. So there's better opportunities. Then second phase, we looked at LinkedIn. So we went on, we took the top 400 companies, again, in our top 400, we identified the leadership, and after data cleaning, I think we ended up with 2,853 profiles, pulled the profiles, and important to note, the data that we pulled is the same data that you would see if you went onto LinkedIn and clicked on my profile. We didn't have any special access. We didn't have any special information. It's what is on the publicly facing profile for an individual. And we went a little bit deeper in the organization. First one was executive suite. We went down to director, and we found is as you go up, the representation decreases. So even in the leadership, there are challenges to get to those last couple levels. So the things that we focused on in the career profile, again, we looked at your entire career profile. So if you looked at mine, you would see the universities that I've attended, the number of companies, the duration of the companies that I stayed at, education companies, and then, how did my career path flow? So what we found is women change companies 56% more times. So there's more firms, more changes that women have to go through. And if you actually look at this, 58% of men reported staying with 1 or 2 companies to reach the executive suite, whereas only 27% for women. So from this, it suggests that if you're a woman and you want to change, you want to achieve the C-suite, you may want to consider moving companies. And if you're a man, you may want to stay with the same company. Now, an important thing to note, none of this research, none of our conclusions, none of our findings suggest that the issue is with women. It is the firms, it is the industry. The industry needs to change. So I just want to make sure that's a point that I bring up. Total positions, basically women have more rungs on the ladder. To reach the same level, women have more positions, more titles that they have to hold to reach a common level. So that's taking longer, it's requiring more effort, and it's an unlevel playing field. All right, I'm going to move a little faster because I know I'm probably lagging behind on time. Education. More than half of women and less than 1/3 of men have graduate degrees to achieve the same positions. So women are having to obtain additional certifications, additional education, just to stay level. Again, other things that industry really needs to look at and consider. And also you can see from the percentages, there's a higher percentage of MBAs and JDs because the non-engineering positions are significantly higher than the engineering representation for women. Again, that 25.2 versus the 3.9, if you go back a couple slides. Also, women have larger networks. So there's more connections, both internal to the organization and external. Again, I'm going to accelerate a later. So in summary, women have more companies to work for, more rungs on the ladder, more education, larger networks, and yet are 83% less represented. So more companies, more titles, more education, and larger networks, and still significantly behind in terms of the. One thing to note here, it's not included in these slides because of time, but we also took the data after our observational findings. We took the data and put it into a machine learning model, and training the model and then testing it, and essentially testing, removing the name, removing any gender identifying information based on just the profile. It was able to predict 89.52% of the time the correct gender. So men and women follow distinctly different career paths in our sample. Okay, so this is actually a complementary study where we took the LinkedIn data, and a fellow PhD student, Mazi, who's a wizard, he went and took the comments and the recommendations from the LinkedIn profile. So the last couple slides focused on education, companies, titles, and longevity. This kind of went to that information on the far right of our spreadsheet, if you will, and pulled the comments and the recommendation to see, is there a likability versus competency? So if a woman exhibits traits traditionally associated with men, again, this is prior research, we're not making, we're not making these distinctions. These are psychology and sociology findings. But when women demonstrate those traits of competence, they're liked less. They have a lower likability. And we use the data mining to go ahead and go through that. So here's a real quick example. These are actual recommendations. Names are scrubbed. But it's basically taking that text. I had the pleasure to work with Jeff, and we went ahead and created a likability dictionary and a competency dictionary as well. And going through this process, what we found was that men receive higher likability scores. And this is regardless of whether it's a man writing a recommendation for a man or a woman writing a recommendation for a man. So again, when women are showing competency, it's impacting them negatively from a likability perspective. All right, now let me jump to this is the third phase. We just completed this recently. Had the opportunity to meet and interview 20 women leaders in AEC. And we have 250 pages of text from the transcripts, and we got into some incredibly great and deep discussions. But in the interest of time, here's the boiled version. We took those experiences and basically created and leveraging what is existing in literature, leveraging their suggestions. There's some tremendous suggestions in those interviews. We took a look and say, hey, what can companies do? Because again, this is the purpose of this research, is to now create change. So STEM scholarships, this is for companies and clients. Starting early, we found a number of the interviews said, I had no idea that AEC was an option for women. Didn't even know what it was until I got to college. Now you have the opportunity to go into the elementary and secondary school programs, raise that awareness, get young girls and young women interested before they get to college, and make sure that they understand that this is an opportunity and a potential career path. And then also directed diversity scholarship to increase those opportunities. As an aside, this is a gender-focused study, but as we go forward, there's opportunities to extend it beyond just gender to other marginalized organizations or groups. Intentional recruiting. Some of the success stories, as simple as at a job fair, we staffed it with women, and that attracted women that were looking for positions, and that increased the women's representation in the organization. And then also, creating a culture surrounding that. One of the great suggestions was, in the trailer, we have a closed door that is a safe space, and it can be used for religious, meditation, nursing mothers, but it wasn't designated as any particular group. It was just a set aside space for personal needs. A negative comment that was provided in one of the interviews, one woman talked about the fact that she had to pump under a bridge with a blanket over in her car. And she said, what woman is going to sign up for that? So creating that culture to be able to retain that mid-career and early career women so that they don't leave the industry. That's one of the issues, women leaving early and reducing the numbers as you go forward. All right, I'm going to accelerate a little. I think I'm late on time. Diversity programs, very important. One thing we found, companies that have a stated public commitment to diversity on their website almost doubled the representation of companies that didn't. It was basically saying, hey, this is important to us, and they were backing it up with actual action. This last one, this one really resonated with me. One example in the interviews, the candidate or the interviewee talked about an RFP that requires 40 years of experience and a particular bridge design, one that's only built every 10 or so years. So the number of people who are qualified to begin with is very small, and it's impossible or incredibly difficult to find a woman who has those experience because it's so limited. So changing that RFP from the client side to open it up for more opportunities. For women, we found mentorship from early on, both internal and external to the organization. A lot of women talked about their passion. I mentioned earlier, green companies had higher representation. We had a number of women in the 20. Granted, it's a very small sample. They were involved with water, environmental, and they really spoke to the connection with the community and connection to the larger mission. And then interpersonal relationship, family was brought up a lot. Having a supportive partner or family organization, family group, propelled them through their success. All right, in summary, I'm going to turn this one over to Dr. Tui, if you want to jump in and take it away. And I apologize for running long if I did.
Thank you, Paul. And yeah, good afternoon, everyone. So, and when we first take a look at the data, we were also shocked about this. Even I have been working in the academia, especially also in the construction industry for many years. And we all know that the construction industry is male dominated, but still, if you take a look at the data, that we definitely see this, gender disparities there in the AEC industry there. So I want to also highlight a few things that Paul mentioned. So I think that every business, every construction companies would like to really attract the female workers and female engineers to there. But the question here is that overall within this industry, what can we do more to make more women-friendly environment so that we can address this workforce shortage challenges within the industry and also attract more females to the industry there. So the data actually show a few policy suggestion that the industry, not only at the individual company level, but also the industry and even the public policy that we should really focus on. So the first one, we do see that when a company has or include diversity statement in their mission vision statement there, and the company focus more on the diversity issue and provide more opportunity for female engineers and other type of groups there. So creating a justice environment within the business definitely is one thing that we need to really focus on, like the company cultures here. And second, it looks like large company has a better performance in terms of gender diversity here, which lead to one observation that do we really need more resources so that we can really address this issue? If that's the case, that including some kind of resources requirements that will help for the whole industry to address that. And also this would really consider, we should really consider from the public policy standpoint. And Paul mentioned that the requirements from the owner side, that sometimes it's an unconscious bias, even that we talk about this recommendation, and nobody really claim that would really biased to any women there. But on the other hand, this is the unconscious. So sometimes that we do see that when a public agency issue a request for proposal, such kind of requirements need to be reviewed by this kind of bias that we might not really notice that under the traditional practice. So there's a few other things that we do notice that we should really focus on and help the industry to be more diverse and also efficient in long term there. So thank you for all for your attention there, and we'll basically open the floor for questions, and also we have the greater panel will basically share their experience there too. Jennifer, so back to you there.
All right, great. Thank you, Paul and QC, for your efforts and insight on this important topic. We really appreciate you shedding light on gender disparities. I always say, you don't know what you don't know until you know it, right? Yeah. My name is Laura Irwin. I'm the safety director for Southway Builders and member of NAWIC Baltimore, your co-host here. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce the panelists who are going to share what their companies are doing to help to decrease these gender disparities. So very interested to hear what each of these companies are doing to help women in construction. Andrea Jansen with the Ambition Theory is here. Kai Starnes for Gilbay Building Company. Megan Evans with BG&E. Brianna Allen with Clark Construction. Beth Pointer with Dunn Construction. Julianne Med with Consigli Construction. And we have our moderator, Libby Menderata with GE Frisco and NAWIC DC. Libby, I'll hand it over to you.
Yes, thank you, Laura. Wow, so there's certainly a whole lot to unpack here, and I think the biggest takeaway for women, especially this week as we celebrate the 25th anniversary of Women in Construction Week, is the fact that there is actual real data stating that women have been discriminated against, and that the paths for them to get elevated are stacked against them. So it's very, very insightful. And I'm so excited to have this group of panelists here today who are all making waves within their companies. We have some top VCs who are going to be speaking, somebody who's a business owner, somebody who has their own company to help elevate women. And I'm really excited to hear from these panelists and their point of view of how they are working towards making our industry more inclusive and building up women within our industry and helping women get elevated. So we'll take a few minutes to introduce everybody through the order, and I'm going to have Andrea start introducing herself, please.
Hi, my name is Andrea Jansen, and I am so excited to be here and so excited about the research that you did. And I am the founder of Ambition Theory, and we are a leadership development company, and our focus is 100% on getting women in construction to their next level of leadership.
Thank you. Hi.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kai Starnes. I'm a project engineer with Gilbane Building Company. I've been in the construction industry for about 2 years, and I lead our Women's Employee Resource Group here at Gilbane Baltimore office.
Thank you. Megan? You're on mute, Megan.
You would think after 3 years of Zoom meetings, I'd be able to figure out the mute button. But good afternoon, everyone. Megan Eves, Manager of Project Outreach and Coordination with Baltimore Gas and Electric. I have over a decade of experience in the utility industry and a lot of non-traditional roles here at BGE, and also advocate for women in non-traditional roles, and also a member of the Baltimore NAWIC chapter, as well as a board of directors. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Brianna?
Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna Allen. I am a design manager with CART Construction. I've been here for almost 3 years, but prior to this, I was practicing architecture for design firms for about 7. So I've seen, multiple avenues of the AEC industry and how gender plays into leadership roles. So I'm excited to talk about this subject with everyone here today, especially considering the data we just saw on the screen.
Okay, thank you. Beth?
Hi, I'm Beth Pointer. I'm the owner of Dunn Construction, a remodeling firm here in Baltimore. I started in construction about 26 years ago as an iron worker in St. Louis, and I was one of 3 women in a 3,600 person local union. So things have changed a lot, and I'm happy to own my own company and get to work with a bunch of women.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Julianne?
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. Julianne Med with Consigli Construction, our general contractor, construction manager up and down the East Coast. I am a business development manager in DC and throughout the Mid-Atlantic. And I'm also on the board of directors for the NAWIC DC chapter. Been in the construction industry my entire working career, about 15 years or so. Lots of different aspects of construction. So happy to talk with you all about it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So as our audience can see, our panelists are full of women who have been in the industry for a long time and can add so much value, insight, and experience into the findings that Paul and QC have shown us today. So it leads me to my first question, which is, what stood out to you the most about Paul and QC's findings, and have you experienced any of these issues yourself? Talk a little bit more about your experience and what the data means to you. And we're going to go ahead and get started with Andrea on this one.
So for me, thank you so much for doing this research, QC and Paul. I have seen, so we are a leadership development company, so I don't actually work in the construction industry myself, but all of our clients do. And every single thing you said, I hear every single day. So I was not surprised by the research that you found, but I'm really glad that we have quantified this, because a lot of times people, they don't understand. There's this elephant that we're trying to hide, everything's great at our company. We're an equal opportunity employer. And the fact that you've done this research, it really exposes the elephant that you said it. It's not women that need to change. It's actually the culture that needs to change. So I think that you've given us data to actually show this and even start that conversation about let's shift the the burden off the shoulders of women and look at it from a cultural perspective. And I love the fact that you started with the ENR 400 because it just shows this is all of our issue. It's the whole industry. It's not one company's doing a bad job. There's no shame involved. It just is. And how can we move forward together? The other interesting thing I thought was whenever I talk to companies, like more at the senior level, the thing that usually comes up is like, oh, we're working on it. We're focusing all this energy on recruitment, but the pipeline isn't there. So that's the reason we don't have women in executive leadership in our company. Or a lot of companies that we talk to, it's like, you know what, there's not a lot of women, there's like maybe 1 or 2 women at that project manager level, but there's nobody higher in the hierarchy in the organization above that level. And what your research has told us is that it's actually not a pipeline issue, that the pipeline is absolutely there. And the things you measured, like the network, that is really important in construction. It's all about relationships, the years of experience, those technical degrees, like all those boxes that you need to check on the RFP are all there. They're in the pipeline. And I think it really shows that the next step is we really need to educate people on culture and bias and how that shows up, because I think that's what's going to really make change in the industry. So thank you for doing this research. I am really excited about what's going to come out of it.
Great. Well, Beth, I know, you own your own company and started it for this very reason, probably of, you found a need and you created it yourself. So what is your viewpoints about the study here?
Yeah, thanks again for Paul and NQC for putting this data together. And it's not surprising, as Andrea said, it's still sobering, the stats. And I think that if you probably took that from the leadership level and went down to the job site level, for people who are doing the laboring work in the job site, that these numbers just continue. And it's not just in leadership. And I did start this company because I couldn't find a company that I wanted to work for that was going to allow me to live the kind of life I wanted and also be able to work with people who are going to be respectful. And I think the thoughts on how to improve these issues that Paul pointed out, I think are all really good, but I think there's also some issues that, like when Paul talked about not having a place for a woman to pump, and that who's going to want to work in a place like that. It's like, there's a lot of things that are about having a strong commitment to and consequences to workplace violence and harassment, and not just like quid pro quo harassment, but just like everyday, microaggressions and things like that just build up, where it's like, there's a lot of jobs out there for competent people. And this isn't an issue for women. Like these women can go and get great jobs anywhere. These are great leaders. It's an issue for this industry, and it's an issue for our clients and for the industry as a whole. That labor shortage of 650,000 people is massive. And for every 5 people in this industry retiring, only 1 is coming in. And that means that costs are going to go up. It means that all of these things are going to be a bigger problem. So this isn't just about like helping women. This is about like a much bigger problem. I'm really interested to hear what everyone else has to say. I know, Brianna, I think you were going to comment.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. And like everyone said, echoing what they said, thank you, Paul and QC, for presenting these findings. I'm going to say this again, that none of those numbers were surprising to me at all. I think they're numbers that I know and I have lived not only in my career, but leading up to it, because as a Black woman also, the notion of you have to work twice as hard to get half as far is something that we hear before we go to college. We hear that before we come into the industry. So I'm coming in knowing that I'm fighting an uphill battle. And so one, to just acknowledge some of the disparities that exist is the step, in my opinion, to creating room for something to change. If we try and ignore, this thing that exists, this thing that is inherent to our industry, it's not going to give good room for change to happen. And so I think that, yes, it was good to acknowledge it. I think the next step, definitely, I like what Andrea said about the culture that has to change, some of the things that need to shift. I think even when you come down to some of the resource groups that have formed, we at Clark have a women's Insight Network. That's the name of our women's resource group. It's creating a space to discuss these things, to raise viewpoints that we have about the change that needs to happen. But I think in one of the later questions, I do have some thoughts on just some things we can do to make women not only feel seen in the workplace, but to know that there is a strategic interest in the things that they have to contribute. Because I think someone wrote in the comments, when we see it, we can be it. When your leadership is telling you, here's where I think you fit in, and here's how I know you are going to improve the outcome of this job, you feel like not only am I just a title here, but my company knows who I am, they know my strengths, and they see an opportunity for me to add value. So I think that's how we start to build on changing that culture, and everyone has to be a part of that.
I so agree. And, you being part of Clark, one of the largest conglomerates in the country, you might think that you're insignificant within your company. So the steps that you were taking, Brianna, I know in your resource groups to make women feel seen and heard, it's even more important in a larger company. I think Paul Hickey wanted to make some comments on this question before we continue on. Go ahead, Paul.
Awesome, thanks. So a couple of the comments that the panelists made. So Brianna, you mentioned the benefits of the diversity. Those are proven. I mean, those are prior scientific studies that we researched and pulled in, but how to communicate that to leadership. So it's not, okay, well, we want to make sure we take care of women. No, it's, hey, this is going to help my business and my bottom line, and incentivize them to make the change they need to. Also, I think it was Andrea that mentioned the pipeline. It's really that leaky pipeline. So there are enough women coming out of college with that degree, but there's a lot of losses in that early and mid career. And a lot of the reasons we found: family, hostile work environment, sexual harassment, glass ceiling. So all of those are preventing the women to get to that, maybe that project manager position or the division manager position, such that when you're looking at candidates for a VP, a lot of those qualified women may have already left the industry in those early years. And then the other one, as far as the overall, the responses to the research, this is anecdotal, but when I talk to women, especially women in the industry, they're like, yes, that's experience. That's what I experienced every day. Thank you. Thank you. Now I can go, I'll politely say, not shove it in somebody's face, but I can go take this and it backs up everything I'm experiencing. When I talk to men, they're like, wow, I didn't realize that. I thought, and this is their reaction, not mine, I thought women were just complaining. I didn't realize it was actually a real problem. So for men, a lot of men are blind to it. Shouldn't be, but are.
That's why your research is so important, because like I said, I feel like we've talked about it for many years now, but now we can actually say, hey, we're not just talking about it. This data really exists, and women are marginalized and discriminated in this industry. So going back to some of your data where you said women have to switch jobs in order to get elevated, I think that that's certainly true for a lot of females. And I want to go to Julianne on this question, because I want to get your thoughts on that. Have you ever switched jobs to advance your career in any type of way?
I certainly have, and I would start with saying that I didn't want to switch jobs, in general, to have a career, you want to have a landing spot, a home. And I feel like I searched for that for years. Like I said, I've been doing this about 15 years. And I have switched jobs multiple times. And I do agree that there are more rungs on the ladder for women, at least from what I can see and from my experiences. I've been told that I have great ideas. They love how I run meetings, that after leadership meetings, people would come to me and ask, how do I do this, this, and this, even if I wasn't in the meeting. And then whenever I asked for either not necessarily promotions, but to be given more responsibilities within a company, I've been told so many times in my career to bide my time, be patient, when clearly others didn't have to. And so I would leave. You know, I would express, I've been very vocal my entire career on what I want. And if you're not getting it, you should explore other options. You know, it's not always financial reasons. People are like, oh, you switched jobs, you hopped around. Didn't want to. And it's not all about financial gains, even though that does help. But, you know, you have to network constantly, always be open to opportunities because they're out there. You just have to know that you are worth it and be willing to make the move, find the right management styles that work for you. You know, a manager that really supports you, a company that really supports you. A good fit, a good culture is more important than staying at a job just to look like you don't hop around. You know, go where you're respected, and it's a game changer.
Yep. Thank you, Julian. Yeah, I mean, that's so true, right? We said we need more degrees, we need to job hop more, and we need to have a larger network. So those are already three things working against us. Megan, can you talk a little bit about how that's shaped your career?
Sure, I would love to. I think I started out with my introduction that I have a very non-traditional career path. My undergrad degree and studies are actually in urban forestry and environmental management. Go Terps. But you know, thought you would have asked me, you know, 15 years ago, you know, would I be in the position that I am today? I probably would have laughed at you. But you know, I stayed in that position as a utility forester here at BGE for about 5 years or so of the first part of my career. It was a very flat level organization, and really kind of outgrew the position and really wanted to get to the next level. But in order to do so, you know, I had to go into another organization. So a little bit different, same company, but I think Paul referenced them as rungs. So I joke that I turned in my hard hat and my boots. I was able to get some experience in some high profile areas when I was a utility forester, and actually moved into BG's governmental and external affairs team for a while, and was a lobbyist and got to know a lot of external key stakeholders and elected officials, and was able to, through some weather events and some crises, got to really partner with our operations teams. Really didn't have a background in operations, but really wanted to get into leadership, and really fought hard to get into that role, and have been able to lead a couple field organizations here at BGE. So it's been a positive experience for me. But again, I am a forester by profession, and you know, I have been a lobbyist. I have led field organizations. Now I am leading project managers for coordination and outreach of projects here at BGE. So very, very different, but constantly have to rotate to continue to develop my skill sets.
Thank you. Yes, and it definitely speaks to just, gosh, I'm exhausted just listening how much we all women have to do on a regular basis just to advance ourselves. But that's exactly what these conversations are for. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about what some of your companies are doing to, you know, improve gender diversity. I know companies like Gilbane and Clark have their own employee resource groups. So Kai, I'm going to start with you. You know, what are some ways that your company is making sure that, you know, women have equitable access to success? And what do you think are some best practices to improve gender diversity?
Yeah, thank you, Libby. One thing that I've noticed being new to the industry is just like in recent years, we've seen so many companies, you know, talk about their efforts and what they want to do to increase diversity and inclusion at their companies. And Paul and QC also touched about this, about how it's not really about just talking about it, but implementing these things. And one of those, I think it's really important to just have a formalized plan with measurable targets that not only focus on maybe racially diverse groups, but also women as their own separate group. At Gilbane, we've implemented an inclusion and diversity strategic plan that has 5 pillars, but within this plan, we've focused on each individual racially diverse group and women separately. So one of the pillars in this plan is our workplace diversity pillar, which has targets like increasing the number of female employees and females in leadership positions by over 50% than our levels in 2020 by the year of 2025. And one of the ways that we're doing that is really taking a targeted approach to recruitment So that also includes 50% of new hires and I guess hires out of college being female. Coming straight out of college into this industry, that's something that I've noticed with Gilbane. I met Gilbane representatives at a college career fair, and them having a woman, and not only women, but also Black women at their table to speak to students. That definitely attracted me, being a Black woman myself. And then also during interview processes, having women in the room that I could, understand my unique needs as a woman versus some of the male counterparts. Another thing that I also think Brianna will touch on this as well is here at Gilbane, we have women's employee resource groups, and part of this plan also focuses on the need to build the success of our employee resource groups. Personally, I'm involved in Empower, which is our women's employee resource group, and it really provides a space for women to, have conversations about their unique needs, and also bring in people who will support these. It gives me personally a platform to address these and bring it to, higher ups in leadership roles within the company that I might not have had the opportunity to do so if I wasn't part of a group like this. So I think not only is recruitment really important, but retainage is also, I think, even more important when it comes to supporting women and women's growth within this industry.
Yes, all good points. Brianna, I'm sure you probably have a lot to add to that as well, with Clark doing the same sort of things.
Yeah, so similar, I'll touch a little bit just on what Kai said. We also have we call them energy groups, but energy with the ERG capitalized for the employee resource groups. We have WIN, our women's resource group, Builder, which is our Black leadership resource group, LEAP, which is an LGBTQ resource group, and OLA, which is a Hispanic resource group. And I find that I will also add that there are more resource groups developed, and we now have a strategic plan that lets employees know how to start one of their own, especially when you're an identifying member of a marginalized group. But when you have support systems in place for people to be connected to resources based on what they have something in common with someone else, I think there is just a better opportunity for certain conversations to take place. Certain conversations are promoted. So each of our employee resource groups have platforms that the entire company can see, whether through writing, whether through being able to attend our events. And through that, you get to promote different voices. So sometimes, the comment of not seeing leaders who look like you in a big company, that can still happen, because even though there are better diversity numbers, we have a lot of great women leaders here at Clark. But that doesn't mean that starting day one, you're going to automatically know who those people are. So I know one of the first things that happened, literally the first day that I came to work, not only did my direct manager welcome me in so that I knew who she was, but she connected me to resources that she knew would be helpful for me at Clark from day one. She set video meetings, because I started during 2020, so this was even in a virtual environment. Video meetings with people she knew would be resources for me on my path to success, who I could go to if I had a question, so I would feel comfortable. Sometimes you don't feel comfortable not knowing something, especially when I've got to come into this room with confidence. To have a seat at the table, I want to have something meaningful to say. Let's talk about how we get people to that point. Sometimes someone needs an advocate. Sometimes someone needs a connection to a resource. And as someone who is already a leader who is a woman, you have the power to connect someone else. That takes no time. And so I think as women do that for themselves, I think the men on our team are also great. They get to learn from how our manager orchestrates connections, how she puts us in positions to succeed. When it comes to our goal setting workshops that feed into our employee performance reviews, not only do I have goals that I know are going to look favorable in the eyes of Clark Construction, because again, my manager is prepping me and putting me on projects that are strategic. She knows Brianna will do well in this situation. That means Clark's going to do well in this situation. That means she's going to want to advance. So taking out the notion of, we've hired a woman for the same job that we've hired men for, let's put them both on the project and see what happens. No, take some of the, this is an anonymous. We know that I'm a woman. We know I'm going to have certain things in my background that feed well into my job. So let's be strategic about that. Another thing that I mentioned in the beginning, again, I can honestly say that every executive at Clark who has worked with me directly on a project knows my name, knows my background, knows what I've done before coming to Clark and how they think I can be successful on a project that we're working on. Having that right when you walk into the room takes some of the layers of, I would say stress or any anxiousness off that can come from second guessing yourself. And I know that firsthand because I've been in job situations where not only was I second guessing myself, but someone else was. And I think the other people second guessing me started to make me feel like maybe this shouldn't be a goal of mine, or maybe I shouldn't want to be there. So that extra validation from the top down, I think feeds into this being a place where not only do I know for myself that I can succeed, but I know that the company that I'm working for knows that I can succeed and they want me to be in leadership positions. I think that is the start to tackling some of these gaps that we have. And I think that if other companies not only adopt the model of, employee resource groups, giving people the chance to touch these resources for themselves, but even if you're a smaller business and, we have like 4,500 employees. So we have a lot of employees. We have a lot of room for that to happen. When you get down to the smaller level, taking the time as the leaders of companies to know the people in your organization and to make them feel seen by validating things about themselves, knowing that we've talked about pumping a couple of times.
Yeah.
I'm a pumping mother. So my leaders know that about me. And instead of ignoring that when I have to leave in a meeting for 20 minutes and come back and miss something, those people who have children themselves, they talk about how, wow, that can be tough. And I think just having parts about you that is unique, that for you are big deals, but often other people don't see. When you start to connect with someone over things that are unique to them and feed into them as a person, they are going to, I think it's easier to retain that talent, and it's easier for them to see themselves succeeding at your company.
Thank you, Brianna.
Thank you. I just want to remind our panelists that we have 15 minutes to go over the next 5 questions. So if we could.
Yeah, we just have 3 questions left, and we'll get through them very quickly. But Brianna, you bring up a good point where it's about the leadership. It can't just be, these initiatives can't just be at the HR level or the employee resource group level, but that tone really and meeting those diversity standards has to come from the very top. So Beth, I know you come from you have a small company that you created yourself. Julianne, you come from a very large company. So I'd like to hear from, Beth first, what are you doing? What do you think matters on the executive and leadership level to make these initiatives happen?
Yeah, we're a much smaller company. We're about 1,000 times smaller than Clark. We are 5 people. We're all women. I think the main thing is really pushing for competency of all varieties of the people that we hire. So even if you're coming in an apprentice level, how well do you take feedback? How well do you learn new skills? What's your emotional intelligence, your EQ? Because especially working on a small team, this matters a lot more than so many other things. But we do a lot of work with schools. We're working with a high school called the Community School here in Baltimore, where we teach them home skills every month. And so working with the community, we're trying to start to work with the Girl Scouts here in Baltimore to teach those kids some skills. And I think wherever we can introduce women to this industry and that show them the representation that you all have talked about and that you guys are showing and making a place for them in our organization. We're a much smaller company, so we can do things a little bit differently. And it is very easy for us to know everyone really closely, where it's very inspiring to hear what's happening at Clark and Gilbane, and that these larger companies are making such an effort to get to know and really promote women and put you in the right positions. That is heartening. My earlier experiences in construction kind of told me something different. So I'm really happy that these companies are learning what a valuable resource we are. So
Great. How about you, Julianne? What, from a larger company perspective, how do you think leadership matters at that level?
Yeah, and I think I'll echo between Brianna and Beth. I think we're kind of in the middle in terms of size of company, but we're from Maine all the way down to Raleigh, and then the U.S. Virgin Islands. And leadership they're very intentional on it, on our DE&I efforts. There's so much training available and mentorship and leadership development programs. It is just constant emails on take this training. It's all open to everyone. They recommend it. Some are required internally, but we look to promote from within, and then we are also very intentional with our hiring. Kai, I know you said that having women at career fairs, things like I think it's called the OWLS event. I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but it's women coming out of the military, and it's all women. So we have ex-military ladies on staff, so we bring them. It's very important for them to know that construction is an option for them. So we encourage associations and community outreach internally. Some companies, I've worked for smaller companies where they were scared to let their employees go out and network because they were afraid to lose them. But if you are taking care of your employees, then being involved in associations like NAWIC, CREW, other women's organizations in construction and outside of that, just makes you feel more involved in the company as well as the community and the community of construction. So we're very intentional about it, and Consigli just advocates for people to be their true authentic selves at work, whether from the field all the way up to C-suite. Be yourself, and it is rewarded, it's welcomed, and we want everyone to feel comfortable at work.
That sounds, so encouraging that all of you are part of companies that really value, females, and have made a lot of strides and headway in these last few years to make women feel a part of it. Not just women, it sounds like other marginalized groups as well within your companies. So obviously your companies are all leading in the right way, and other companies should certainly be taking note of what the leadership is doing, what the larger companies are doing, and that's how we will grow and change as an industry. So to kind of piggyback off of that, we're talking about allies now, and let's say somebody's not an executive or a leader and they find a need within their company to support women-centric policies and programs. How would you go about advising someone to do that if it's not on the executive level, but they want to make some changes? Kai, have you run into that situation, or can you talk a little bit about how one would go about making, implementing some of those women-centric policies?
Yeah, there's two things that I kind of preach by, I would say. One is education and allyship. So coming into Gilbane kind of with the mindset that I do have, just kind of from different diverse backgrounds, I noticed that Gilbane was already kind of making these strides, but like I kind of shared earlier, it comes from the top down. I personally am involved with executives here in the Baltimore office, but like Paul and QC shared, it's not that men don't want to see this progress. It's sometimes that they're just ignorant to it. And I'm speaking of men simply because a lot of them fill our executive positions. So it really comes to just having conversations with them, and it can be intimidating, especially for someone who might be an entry-level employee, but it doesn't need to be an uncomfortable position. It could be as simple as, for me specifically, when we're holding events through the Women's Employee Resource Group, talking to some of the male executives and letting them know, like, we would really appreciate your support. These are the challenges that we're facing, and that can be just having people support our employee resource group. So that's the education aspect, but also just really promoting the allyship that is needed from people of all levels within the company and from all different types of backgrounds and identifications. So yeah, that's how I would say.
Yeah, thank you. Megan, do you have any thoughts on that as well?
Sure. Just to kind of add to what Kai said, I wrote down a couple keywords that she said, allyship, conversations. I really don't think you need to have a fancy executive VP title associated with your name or your position to be able to add value and make impact within your organization. I think it's important to advocate for yourself Find allies. Allies can be leaders, but they can also be your peers. Advocate for what you believe in. Find yourself a champion that can help you drive some of the changes that you want. And I also think it's very important to do some solutioning. If you have an idea, or if you want to execute a program or a policy, I think it's very important to have some solutions to bring to your leadership team as well.
Thank you. All great ideas. And, you know, the number one allies that we always talk about is the men. And I always say this, that sometimes the man's voice is much louder for whatever reason that the case may be. Their voices usually have carried louder throughout the history of time than ours. So how can we get the men on our side? If they speak for us, if they're on our side, if they can go to bat for us, you know, maybe our movement will you know, progress even quicker. So, you know, Andrea, I know this is kind of your world where you help to elevate women, but how would you also specifically guide the men in this industry who are very well-meaning, and they actually, a lot of the times they don't know that they may be offending somebody, or they may be, their intent isn't the way that it comes across. And I know they are, like I said, they do want to be on our side. We've had multiple panels and events throughout the last year. I've always said, bring a man to our women's event, bring a man to our women's event. They need to see what we talk about. They need to see what issues we face. And now that we have it backed by data, it makes even more sense to get them involved. So Andrea, speak to us about how would you tell a man to, you know, have become a better ally for us?
So I think this has been repeated by a bunch of different panelists in Paul's research, is that a lot of men just don't know. And I think Kai just said it, it starts with education and creating like a non-judgmental environment, and really it being about curiosity and not like men versus women, about kind of everybody moving forward together. And I know that sounds a little bit fluffy, but one point that really came out for me of Paul's research about how women are very qualified, but there's all these extra rungs where they need to, you know, step above in order to get to that formal leadership role. And I think from a man, from like starting to be an ally, it's really embracing this concept of sponsorship. And Paul's research really pointed out where we're kind of like getting stuck in the mentorship versus sponsorship realm. And most people don't know what the word sponsorship means, and we don't often say the word sponsorship out loud, but mentorship is like a backbone of the construction industry. That's how you learn, that's how you get ahead, right? It's such an important piece, but there's a gender bias that shows up in mentoring, and I think if we can become aware of this, both men and women, that is the easiest way to change the game and really become that ally. So I'll quickly explain it. So mentorship is really about advice and preparation. So that's, you know, telling people how to do their job, supporting them, giving them that emotional support. Whereas sponsorship is about creating an opportunity for someone. So recommending someone, putting them in a position where they're going to learn and grow. And the difference between mentorship and sponsorship is really skin in the game. So in a mentoring relationship, you're giving someone advice, they take your advice, they completely fail, nothing happens to you as that mentor. Whereas, but in same goes if they're very successful, nothing happens to you as the mentor. You don't get accolades for that. But in a sponsoring relationship, if you are recommending someone, if you're putting someone on a project that maybe you don't think they're ready for, if they fail, it looks bad on you as well. If they're successful, it's like, great job for putting that team together, and you get credit for that as well. And what Paul's research really proved to me is that this is happening in the construction industry. So it's really that women are getting all that advice and that preparation, which is mentorship, get the degree, you know, get the next title before, get that up that next run before we'll give you that big opportunity. So I think it's becoming aware that we typically, when men are mentored, they're usually sponsored. So typically how that shows up, it's like the junior person, you know, I want to get to the next level. It's like, okay, come along with me and we're going to create that opportunity together. Whereas women, typically it's, read this book, practice this, wait, I think Julianne, you said it, like do your time and it'll come when you're ready. And we have recently done some research on this, and we have the quantitative data that shows women are getting a ton of mentorship, a ton of preparation, but they're not getting those sponsorship opportunities. So I think the shift it's really a shifted mindset about, instead of preparing that person for that opportunity, I'm going to look for that opportunity and I'm going to give it to them. And I'm going to be there to support them to ensure they're successful. And I think that's the first step in becoming an ally. And what I love about it is it's a win for everybody, right? Like if you recommend someone good and they do a great job, it looks good on you and it's a win-win for everybody. And it doesn't take a lot of time, really. It just takes the time, like you just need to get to know that person, see what skills they have, and then just be on the lookout for those opportunities where they can contribute more and really level up.
Love that, Andrea. I've heard you talk about it before, but it makes so much sense to talk about sponsorship and mentoring, and how you said our allies probably need to have a little skin in the game for us. So, and I think, can sponsorship also come in different ways, for people within different companies? I would love to recommend a friend of mine for a position that I know is open, and, yes, it would be my name on the line, but if she does well, that's awesome and wonderful, but at least we're giving other people a chance. So, I encourage all of us as we're working towards making this industry more inclusive, that we all look out for each other. And that goes for all of the females, including males, including other counterparts that are part of other companies that may even be part. We're always happy to send somebody to a competitor who we think they'd be happy there, and vice versa. I think the pot is big enough for everybody. So if we look at it that way, we can all work and help and support each other. So thank you so much to all of our panelists. That goes the conclusion of my personal questions. I wanted to turn it back to Paul and QC to see if you had any added thoughts based on what the panel's answers and your research together. Either one of you.
All right, I'll go ahead and jump in. So one thing that, just really got my wheels turning, especially when Kai and Brianna talking about the initiatives that their firms are doing, and they're large companies. So we found that diversity creates better business outcomes. So the question I would have is, do firms have better diversity because they're large, or are they large because they have better diversity? So is that, that's part of the DNA of the organization, and those different ideas and the different perspectives is creating that large organization. So something, a challenge for any firm to think about.
Sure. QC, did you want to add anything as well?
Oh, that's a good question. So probably just wait for the panel to discuss that first.
Did you get Brianna or Kai? Probably you might be able to answer this a little bit better. Do you think, you're large because you have the DEI efforts, or the DEI efforts have helped make the company larger?
I think it goes hand in hand. I personally cannot answer the question directly, but I know that the D&I efforts have definitely persuaded, or I guess pushed me into the direction of this company, versus when I was going through the interview processes with some other companies where they might have been present, but they weren't, I would say, I didn't recognize them. I think that did definitely had kind of put a sway into my decision when it came to who did I want to work with, who did I feel like would support me. But I also definitely think that having a larger company, it may be sometimes easier to implement these plans and also measure them routinely in an organized way, where you'd actually have results that you can look back to. But I think they both play hand in hand, honestly.
Very true. Brianna, did you want to add anything to that?
I think that was a great answer. I really don't have anything more to add.
Okay, awesome. Laura, I think you had some questions that you were hoping to ask.
I do have a couple questions. And I think that actually Brianna, Kai, Paul, and QC may be able, or anybody could really give me some ideas here. I read the executive summaries that you had, and you talked about new training programs. Now, are these training programs directed at women? Are these training programs directed at men? Like, what does that look like when we talk about training programs, to help with gender disparities?
I can answer really quickly because this is
Great.
something I didn't get to touch on when I spoke. I know one of the trainings that we are doing at Clark is called a conscious inclusion training. I got to participate in that training when it was in its pilot phase, just in our company assessing, was this something that's a good fit? And so it takes you through the different types of biases that exist, how they present themselves in a workplace, and things we can do to overcome them from a holistic perspective. It's not just focusing on gender, it's not just focusing on race. It touches what bias means and how do we consciously include everyone in the fabric of the workplace that we have. And now that the training is something that's offered to all employees, it is voluntary, it's not mandatory. I don't know if it ever will be, but those of us who went through the training now have the opportunity to be instructors. So it also is a course that we get to participate in, and then we can go on and teach it too. But I think that's one of the ones that speaks to how we bring everyone into this conversation of inclusion, equity, and diversity.
Great. Thanks, Brianna. That was really, I love that. I love that. Did anybody from the audience have a question? I don't want to monopolize all the questions. Okay.
I do.
I have a question about competency and likability. You know, for that one, it really hits home for me. And I question, like, how do we educate people that this is an issue? Andrea, you brought up the double bind when this was being discussed, when Paul and QC were bringing that up. How do we go about educating people that this exists, and how do you change it?
I can answer that. So I would say, Laura, it's about education, because most people, I would say, like, we did some research in 2021 with women in construction. And what we found was 78% of women have told that they need to be more confident if they want to get to that next level of leadership. But then those exact same women, 70% of them have been told that they need to be less bossy. So there's that double bind that they face, right? Like, you act like how leaders are supposed to act in your company, assertive and confident, and then you get the backlash for being too bossy, aggressive, or other words that start with a B. And when we shared that data, the first time we shared it was International Women's Week last year. And I remember I got this long email from a man who came, and it was a free session. So, like, their company did not pay for it. And it was this long, heartfelt note saying, "Thank you, Andrea. I had no idea." And I got really curious. So I called this person. I'm like, "Okay, why are you sending me this long email?" And he said, I didn't know. He's like, he actually said, "At first, I didn't believe you. I thought you were making this up." And I'm kind of like, "Well, it was a quantitative survey. I'll give you, the benefit of the doubt." And he said, after the presentation, I had to prove it to myself. So he went and he talked to 4 women on his job site, and they all reiterated the same narrative. And he was like, "Wow, what can I do about this?" And so he took it on himself to book a meeting with his HR department to figure out, like, what can my role be? So I think it's like the education piece is there, but doing it from a place that is not judgmental, that's focused on curiosity, because, like, you don't know what you don't know. And so many people, they just don't know. And there's never been an environment where you can learn about these things. Because a lot of the times, like they just have no idea, and no one's given them the opportunity to learn.
Thanks.
Kai, you raised your hand for something.
My apologies. I was trying to use the applaud.
Yeah.
And Libby, I
yes,
do want
go
to
ahead.
say, I did want to kind of echo something that Paul mentioned, that it's not all just men. I think when the research showed that men and women saw men as more favorable when being confident. So I think a lot of the education process isn't just that men aren't aware that they're doing this. It's also some women that aren't aware of their bias and judgment towards other women. So I think it's just something that everyone can be brought to light on. Sometimes it's something women don't think about either.
100%. I fully can agree to that as well. I think that the education piece has to come through to all of us. Switching gears a little bit, because I know we talked about measuring progress and measuring DEI efforts. Paul, you had a great quote on that. Do you want to just elaborate on the quote that you were talking to me about?
Yeah, and it's not my quote, and I apologize, I'm butchering the quote, but I think it was something that Andrea had put in the chat to expand on it. That which is measured improves. That which is measured and reported improves significantly. So getting these metrics out, sharing them, and those two exec sums that I had shared with the panel and the group, those are geared towards an industry perspective. When you're looking at it, it's like, you know, because in my past life, I was on the other side of the table, and I wanted it quick, I wanted it fast. So it's like, boom, here's a quick executive summary. Oh my gosh, I see it. Now we can make change because we have a benchmark and we can see it and track our improvement year over year.
Yeah, to add on that, actually is so not only the measure for the entire industry, but we also need to really recognize those best performed organizations, or even I would say role models as female leaders. And we should really recognize those companies, individuals who make the contribution to the industry. And that's also very important to really, make everybody aware that we're moving forward, we're really improving. So.
I agree. Well, as I think it's wonderful to end on that great note that we are improving as an industry. Once again, it's the 25th anniversary of Women in Construction. This week, tomorrow is actually International Day of the Woman. So I think this panel was very, very timely. Paul and QC, your research is so valuable to our industry. I can't stress that enough right now. I've been part of multiple conversations for about the last 3 or 4 years, and to just say, nope, the data actually shows that they do not want to elevate us women unless we work harder, unless we get more degrees, unless we build up our network, unless we switch jobs, and that the odds are stacked against us, as women, as mothers, as females in this industry. But I will say I have seen progress. In my time, I've been in this industry for 22 years. I hope all of you can say the same. You have seen progress. There is a goal to get 1 million more females in construction. That goal was set by the Department of State and the Secretary Department of State. It was set by her that in 10 years time, we have a goal of getting 1 million more women into construction. And I can only imagine how much more inclusive we'll be within 10 years of that time. I encourage you also this week to find other WIC Week events. The week has just, I feel like, getting started. We have a lot going on between Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Some are up on the screen right now. Some are part of different organizations. Some are your own company celebrations. And I want to just celebrate all of you this week. Thank you to our allies who are always supporting us. Thank you to our female colleagues who are always supporting us. And thank you to everyone who's helping to make a difference and increase this industry forward. Wishing everybody a wonderful day and week from here. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us on the panelists through LinkedIn or shoot us emails, however you feel comfortable. Happy to answer any additional questions. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Libby.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.